Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And welcome into another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns. I'm joined, as always, by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado. And today, Thursday, September 1st, that's right, it is September. It's game week. It's week one of the college football season. We're joined by Boise State beat reporter Jordan Kaye of the Idaho Press, who's going to help us break down Oregon State's week one opponent, the Boise State Broncos. Jordan is sitting at a golf course in Bend on his drive over from Boise right now, and I think Angie and I are both a little jealous, but Jordan, how's that drive treating you?
Fantastic. Get a little break, enjoy the night here, and then head over to Corvallis in the afternoon tomorrow.
It's a drive that I have done before, and as we were talking about before we hit the record button, some stretches of that drive are a little more scenic than others.
It's the last 2 hours it looks like Kansas. It's just, you can see for 25 miles. It's rough.
A whole lot of dirt. Thank you for everyone who's watching us live on YouTube right now. You guys are helping us crush our numbers on that platform. And of course, if you're listening to the audio version on your favorite podcast app, we thank you and congratulations. You found our new page. Again, still hearing, that some people are struggling to find it. So if you could help us spread the word, leave a 5-star rating. It makes it much easier for people to find our new page since we jumped over to the 24/7 podcast network. Angie, we haven't heard from you yet. How's your Thursday going? You just sent me your prediction for the game, which we won't reveal until tomorrow. We'll save our picks. We'll ask Jordan for his prediction, but the Beaver Blitz staff will go tomorrow. You watching any college football as soon as we get off? We got the Backyard Brawl at 4 o'clock.
That's actually coming on as soon as we're done. We're going to watch some Backyard Brawl, some college football tonight. That's on the ticket. I have a kiddo that just started his first day of high school today, so he might be walking through here any minute. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then I have a senior that starts tomorrow. So it's getting a little real around here.
Crazy stuff. The Machados are representing well at Sherwood High School. I love it.
They are.
So we're going to hear a little bit more from Jordan, and then we're going to ask him a bunch of questions about Boise State, just kind of go one after another and pick his brain a little bit on this Broncos team ahead of this really intriguing matchup, which I think is kind of flying under the radar. It's, nationally televised. It's in a slot where there's not a whole lot of other football going on. So I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. And I think it has the potential to be a tight game, somewhat of a defensive battle, perhaps, which, we haven't really said that much about Oregon State recently. We'll pick his brain a little bit. We'll let him go shoot a 70 on the course over at Tethero. And then Angie and I will pick things up with some news from Corvallis and our keys to the game. But Jordan, let's start off, just, kind of tell our listeners about yourself, where you're based, how long you've been covering the Broncos, and anything else you want to throw out there.
Yeah, so I've only been in Boise for about 8-ish months. Started in January. Before that was over in eastern Idaho, covering in Pocatello for a little bit. But grew up in Phoenix, went to Arizona State, and so have seen plenty of Beavers games where the score was very lopsided in Tempe. And I think it was was it Andrew Luton? Jake Luton?
Jake Luton.
Quarterback.
Yeah.
Jake Luton. Yes, he was a stud. I remember watching, Brandon Cooks run catch, 250 yards, and the Beavers lose by 45. So, Jonathan Smith definitely has produced a lot more competitive teams than, Gary Anderson and some of those guys.
So I assume you were down there for the infamous Eno Benjamin game where he ran for about 300 yards.
I forgot that was Oregon State. Yes, I was at that game. And surprisingly, that game was kind of closer than, a lot of people remember. It wasn't like they won by 50 points, but just he was unbelievable that day. And who was his was it Jamar Jefferson on the other side too? Yeah. I think almost had 200 yards. Yeah,
his
that was
freshman year. Yeah, he ran crazy down in Tempe.
Yeah.
But you're on your way to Corvallis. Have you
Yes.
been to Corvallis before? Have you been to Oregon before?
I had been to Oregon because Boise State actually got to the Portland Regional for basketball for the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
So had gone for that, never been to Corvallis, have heard mixed reviews. So I'm interested to, judge for myself. I've heard the brewery scene. There's apparently a Hawaiian restaurant I've got to check out. Is that true?
Angie can
Local
tell you a
boys.
whole lot about that.
Local boys.
Yes, local boys.
That was the one place people like, you're going to Corvallis, local boys is what you got to hit. I was like, okay, cool. So I've never gone to a place other than Hawaii that is touted for a Hawaiian restaurant. So that's going to be nice.
Oh, we got a dog in the
And
background.
we get Duke. It's Duke.
Woo!
Yay. My killer
Good
dog.
stuff. Good stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you'll get to you'll get to be one of the first outsiders to get a look at Research Stadium during its construction process.
Yeah, I really don't know what it's going to look like. People have been asking, how much of it's ready and stuff. And I was like, I don't know. There's not a ton of pictures or whatever of seeing exactly how it's going to be set up and where the media is going to be. So yeah, I kind of wish my first trip to Reeser was the completed version, but it'll still be cool.
Yeah, the temporary press boxes are nothing to write home about. The viewing angles aren't going to be great. Luckily for you, you're coming in September. It's going to be 80 degrees.
Yeah,
I am quite nervous about those November games when we're shivering in there, and it could be rough. The video board, from what I have heard, is and from what I have seen, I drove by yesterday. It looked like it was complete. I know that they're testing it today. And actually, a BeaverBlitz member posted a picture in the lodge of one of the tests, and it didn't look like all the panels were working. So we're going to find out on Saturday whether this thing works or not. But this stadium is absolutely a work in progress. It's going to be really cool when it's done. But yeah, to your point, Jordan, it's kind of unfortunate that your first trip out is in the middle of all of it.
Yeah, when's it supposed to be done?
They're about 9 months out. I believe the goal and the timeline right now is shaping up towards June of 23.
Okay, that's not terrible.
Yeah. So when Jordan does get to Corvallis, he'll get a first look at this Oregon State football team. And of course, he's bringing his expertise of Boise State with him. We're excited to pick his brain here and kind of get some insight into a Broncos program that, of course, has been dominant in the Mountain West for years and has caused all sorts of problems for Power 5 teams in general, but particularly the Pac-12. Jordan, just to kind of get us started here, who are some of the key players on this year's team that Oregon State fans should be aware of and that the Beavers are probably scheming around as we speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one it's interesting is, quarterback Hank Bachmeier. And in a way, it's a lot kind of like Chance Nolan, where it's his stats are pretty solid, but it's this fan base has a weird love-hate relationship almost, where it's the stats aren't good enough because some of the decision making, late in games could be bad. So, I was reading and hearing you talk about Chance. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same situation. He's the past 3 years though, he's had a new offensive coordinator every single year and also gone into fall camp in a quarterback battle. And so this was his first year with the same offensive coordinator, already knowing the scheme and also knowing he's got the job and not having to work all the way until, right up until the season, not knowing if he's the starter. And so a lot of people have high expectations for him. Coaches think he's looked way better than he ever has in his career. And so he's kind of a guy that the season's almost been in John. And another is the running back, George Holani. I mean, he comes from, St. John's Bosco, the California powerhouse, and had 1,000 yards as a freshman in 2019, but he just gets hurt every single season. And that's kind of the storyline is well, if he can stay healthy, I mean, man, the guy should have 1,200 yards and maybe declare for the NFL this year, but it's just such a big if. And he hardly got tackled in fall camp, and they just didn't want to risk anything. So he's one of those guys where, if he just basically has a couple carries, I mean, if he has 40 yards in a game, they're 16-2 all time. So he's just kind of the linchpin right there. And on the defensive side, their D line isn't great, but they've got a defensive tackle in Scott Matlock, who's this big, 6'6", 300-pound redhead guy who looks pretty fierce, and a lot of people think he might be able to go in the NFL draft, but had like 7 sacks last year, led the team in tackles for loss. And so he's just kind of a run stuffer up front. And that's going to be a fun one to watch him go against Oregon State's offensive line. And then JL Skinner is this big 6'4" safety who, some people think can go in like the 2nd or 3rd round of the NFL draft. He's probably like their best pro prospect and kind of just works everything in the secondary. He had 2 picks last year and like forced 3 fumbles, recovered 2. He just kind of finds himself always around the ball. And, I've seen last year, Chance Nolan can sometimes have some mistakes, and you look for a guy like Skinner to maybe, force a couple of those.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the D line and the secondary there, because I've got that. I'm looking on the rundown here of the stuff we want to ask about, and defensively, it's those 2 position groups. So we're going to get to that in just a second. You mentioned Hank Bachmeier. I think the thing that stands out about him is just the fact that he's been a starter there for a long time. He brings a ton of experience, leadership. Oregon State, of course, has a little bit of that with Nolan, but it cannot be stated enough how important it is to have that continuity on the offensive side. I want to let Angie get in here and get a chance to ask you something if Duke's not barking in the background anymore.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. So if Oregon State's going to have success offensively, what is going to be the key? Is it going to be running the ball? Is it going to be passing the ball? I think it's going to have to be running, but just because I think that your secondary is so strong. But what are your thoughts?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, last year, as good as some of the key guys are on Boise State's defensive line, they were very good against the run. They didn't get much pressure on the quarterback, and so you look at Oregon State's offensive line, and what were they, finalists for the Joe Moore Award last year? I mean, if those guys are as good as they were last year, that's I think where Oregon State's going to be able to just get a bunch of their yardage. Boise State experience in the secondary is so good. Even the corners are both seniors. They have tons of experience on that back end. If they can get the running the ball, I think it could be a tough day for Boise State.
And that's how Oregon State won so many of its games last year, was just dominating at the point of attack. You look back at how Oregon State was able to put 40-plus points on the board against USC, which even in a down year is always ultra talented. And it started in the trenches where Oregon State just dominated with its offensive line and got like 6-7 yards per carry as it did in most games last year. Really impressive what the Beavers were able to do there. So I'm curious to see how they're going to approach Scott Matlock on that defensive line, because I think he's, about as real of a star defensive player that Oregon State's going to see in these first couple of weeks. So that's a very intriguing matchup. So speaking of that D line and the secondary, Boise State last year had the leading scoring defense in the Mountain West. And I know all around, Andy Avalos, head coach there in his 2nd year, more of a defensive minded coach. Are Boise State fans, and are you, and is this team expecting another pretty strong year from that defensive side of the ball?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, you look at everything they did, and they really only lost like 2-ish starters from that defense last year. And so it gives a lot of confidence. They bring back, almost every coach from there. Andy Avalos is a defensive minded guy. And I think the only concern for that defense is, you look, they were one of the highest scoring, defenses in the Mountain West, but you look at some of the yardage. I mean, there were games where they were giving up, 250 rushing yards. There were games where they were giving up, 300-400 yards passing. And so this was the epitome of a bend, don't break defense. But on so many occasions, they got bailed out because they forced turnovers. And that's one of those things where it's like, you look at it and you're like, okay, how much of that was like, skill, like, turnovers can be so lucky sometimes that it's like, I don't know, it's hard to predict that that's going to just completely translate to this season. I think they had 21 total last year. So, you're thinking about that. They're forcing almost 2, maybe 3 a game. And I just don't know if you can, replicate that. But, I've looked in the past and they have done it a good amount of times in the last 10 years. But yeah, they if they can kind of just be a little more stout up front and make teams, try and throw the ball against a really experienced secondary that is bringing back, I think, 4 starters, and they should be in pretty good shape. But yeah, it's going to come down a lot to if their defensive line, if their defensive ends, they brought in a bunch of transfers, one from Weber State, a couple from the JUCO level. Those guys have, can provide the depth on the outside and start getting pressure on Chance Nolan and really making the offensive line, have to work a little bit. And they're in pretty good shape. But yeah, it's a team that I think is going to be led by their defense this season. But it's a defense that was by no means perfect last year and just kind of made plays at the right time to make it look a lot better than at times it was.
It's interesting because I think it has some similarities to Oregon State's defensive unit, where the Beavers, I think, are expecting to be very strong in the back end and are hoping to get a little bit more push from that front 7 this year. And I'll let Angie get back in here again, because I know she's got some thoughts on the whole bend, don't break mindset on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So offensively, Oregon State, I mean, like Carter said, I think it's a lot very similar to Oregon State's defense. I think the secondary is going to be the strength of Oregon State's defense this year. Offensively, what does Bachmeier have to do you think, to have success?
The big thing, so he doesn't have his star receiver last year, Khalil Shakir, who had over 1,100 yards and is now on Buffalo Bills catching passes from Josh Allen. They don't really have a clear number 1 guy. A lot of people think it's going to be redshirt senior Stephon Cobbs, who was pretty solid last year, but pretty solid, still wasn't even 500 yards receiving. So if Hank Bachmeier is going to have success, he's going to have to really just trust his reads and just throw the ball to whoever. If he can kind of start trusting all his receivers and spreading the ball to, 5, 6 guys a game, it's going to be really tough for Oregon State to cover everyone, and for Oregon State's corners to figure out, which matchup's the best. If guys are coming in and off the field and switching up positions, it's going to be really hard. So, I think that's the key for Hank Bachmeier is just, throw the ball to everyone, get the short yardage a lot of the time, give your young receivers who don't have much college experience, get them quick catches that are boost their confidence a little bit, and then go from there. But that's the thing. I think there was too many times last season where, the offensive line wasn't very good. He would just hold the ball, and at times it looked like he was a punching bag out there. Defenses were just blasting him constantly, and that's one of the things is he's got to get rid of the ball quicker, and that takes, partly just being, better about figuring out things on the pre-snap, but also just trusting your receivers to sometimes just check down to the open guy and just, get your 6 yards and go on to the next play. And so that's the thing. And I think coaches have been working a lot with him, and that's hopefully the maturity we get from a 4th-year starter, and, hopefully what he brings on Saturday.
It sounds so much like you and I talking about the Beavers offense, doesn't it, Carter?
It does. These two teams, I mean, we talk about this being a pretty even matchup, Boise State being one of the best teams in the Mountain West, Oregon State looking to become, one of the contenders in the Pac-12. I think the team's strengths and weaknesses really line up, and the way that they're going to approach things on game day, personnel-wise, and with what position groups are leading the way. These two teams are very similar. So I think that is part of what makes this a really intriguing matchup. I'm glad you mentioned Khalil Shakir there, and then also just kind of the pocket pressure that opponents were able to get and ultimately bring down Hank Bachmeier, because I actually made it out to a Boise State game last year and watched them play Air Force, my second time going and watching a game on the blue turf. And a couple of things that stood out to me in that game. Obviously, Air Force is a different animal, running the triple option and whatnot. Service academies are always different than your standard college football opponent. But a couple of things that stood out: Khalil Shakir would catch anything that was even remotely near him. His athleticism, his sure-handedness, he was incredibly fun to watch. Another thing, defensively, Boise State couldn't stop the triple option. I didn't know whether that was, just the scheme was chaotic and whatnot, or if the defensive line was struggling. But then also, and this is where my next question leads, Boise State couldn't really get anything going in the trenches. You know, it looked like the offensive line was getting beat up in the run game, and I saw Hank Bachmeier go down a couple of times. Is the offensive line a concern this year? Was it a concern last year? And with the amount of talent that they have coming back there, because I know that they have some returning starters, do you expect them to take a step forward in pass protection and opening up holes for George Holani?
It would be almost impossible for them to take a step back from last year, and almost in some ways to no fault of their own. They went into their season opener last year was at UCF, and it seemed like they had a pretty solid offensive line. Well, right before the game, their starting center from the year prior is just out with an undisclosed injury. He didn't come back for the entire season. All of a sudden, their right tackle, right in the middle of the first half, just goes down and misses a couple games. And it just kind of sputtered into this thing where it seemed like every offensive lineman last season got injured. In every game, I think the first 5 or 6 games, they had a different 5 guys on the offensive line. They were just switching everyone all the time, and there was never any continuity. You started to see it at the end of the year when most of the guys had played together a little bit, and Holani came back. Okay, it was all of a sudden the running game looked way better. And so it was one of those things where it just showed the importance of the line, and they really tried to address that this offseason. They bring back an all Mountain West guy and left tackle John Ojukwu. They bring over a Washington State transfer who I think just kind of left, with the whole coaching change at right tackle. People have said, he's been unbelievable this season. They get that center who was out last year back, and then, guards are 2 really veterans from 2021 that couldn't block for anyone. You might good?
Yeah, we got you. We lost you for just a sec, but you came back.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it was an offensive line that couldn't do much last season, and all of a sudden this year it's almost a strength of this team. And so at times you just kind of have to cross your fingers and hope they stay healthy. But going into the season, it's almost night and day from where they were last year.
And I think we'll see him tested in week 1 against an Oregon State defensive front that is playing much more aggressively under Trent Bray's direction. Got a lot more pocket pressure in fall camp than Angie and I became accustomed to seeing over the last 4 years. Angie, I'll hand it off to you again for the next one. One of us here before too long, because we got to let Jordan go in just a few minutes, has to ask about Sam Vidlak. So I'll let you broach that subject, because obviously you followed him, as a recruit. And we followed him for his true freshman year at Oregon State. But Angie, I'll pass it off to you for that one.
Thanks for giving me the good one. So Sam Vidlak, he barely stayed for a cup of coffee at Oregon State. So I'm just curious how he's looked. I think he transferred before spring camp for you guys. So had spring and fall with you. What are your thoughts on him? Early returns.
Yeah, so I won't bury the lead. They released the depth chart at the beginning of the week, and he's actually the 3rd string guy. There was a redshirt freshman, a 6'6" guy who's just kind of a dual threat who beat him out in a really close race. But you talk to any of the media people who have gone to practice, and they rave about Sam Vidlak. The way, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's almost like an artistry thing. Like, his ball just looks so good. I mean, the spiral is unbelievable. And, it's tough for him because he was in a quarterback competition with a guy who had been in the program for a couple of years, and he jumps in spring and has to learn the offense and understand, everything about Boise. And from everything I heard is he jumped into that and was fantastic. Just became kind of a machine learning the offense and really studying and stuff like that. I was a little surprised that he wasn't the backup, and I think a lot of people were. But if Hank Bachmeier does move on after the season, I think the competition would get opened up again, and you would have to think, Sam Vidlak's got about a 50-50 shot to win that job. But everyone who watched him was incredibly impressed with him. And, he's not the tallest guy. I think he's like 6'1", but he can throw the ball like 70 yards and just has a cannon, and a really smart dude. So I very impressed with him. And I'd heard from some Oregon State people who were like, no, there were Oregon State fans like calling for him to be the starter. And I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. So very interesting.
You know the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy on the field.
Of course,
Backup or even
yeah.
the second string or the third string.
Especially when he can throw a 70-yard ball in practice.
On a
It's
rope,
funny,
yeah.
the Boise State and Oregon State media groups are one and the same in that, watching him at practice, it's like he's the focal point. He came in as, I believe he was an early enrollee, right, Angie? Back in the spring of 21.
Yeah.
And day one of camp, here's this, should be a high school senior, comes in and he's throwing deep balls and looks like the best quarterback out there. And we're saying, okay, is this guy going to compete for the job right away?
Yeah.
Actually saw some playing time against Idaho last year. Oregon State, had a big lead late in the game and he came in for a drive or two. I know that Oregon State fans were really sad to see him leave. Angie, of course, said, the backup quarterback's the most popular player on the team. Certainly was at Oregon State. I know a lot of Oregon State fans were sad to see him go and are really rooting for him, except for this week. So speaking of the passing game, Hank Bachmeier coming back, a lot of experience. You kind of touched on the wide receivers, and we're going to move on to some bigger picture stuff here in just a second.
I have another question though, because I'm seeing some of the comments here, and we have a lot of Boise fans.
That's
that
a good
are watching.
point. Let's do that.
I'm just curious. So the Boise fans, seem to be thinking this is going to be completely just a runaway. What do you think the team is feeling? Do you think that they're overlooking Oregon State, or do you think that they're maybe taking it a little more serious than maybe the fans are?
I'll throw this comment up here on the screen too.
I think they're taking it more seriously than the fans are. And that was one of the weird things of, scrolling through Oregon State Twitter and Boise State Twitter. It is so rare that in a season opener, both fan bases are so confident. It is just kind of mind-blowing. Both of them are so surefire that it's going to be a easy victory. And I'm like, where? I don't know. It's weird. But, there is that thing at Boise State and, as much as you want to go back and all the history and Kellen Moore and all that stuff, I mean, this is still a Mountain West program that won 7 games last year and is facing off against the Pac-12 team. And I think a lot of the guys on the team kind of realize that. And, you start, putting up the heights and weights of some of Oregon State's offensive linemen, and it's pretty tough to overlook. And you look at their secondary and how many starters they return on defense, this in some ways is a hard team to overlook. And, they only were third or fourth in the Pac-12 North last year, but still the Pac-12, and Boise State still plays in the Mountain West. So yeah, I think the players are taking it pretty seriously and understand the gravity of what this win could do for their season, in the same way that for Oregon State it's kind of could be a stamp of no, what Jonathan Smith is building something, and last year was just a trend going in the right direction. So yes, I think that both fan bases are probably more confident than the players and coaches. I don't know if you guys agree.
Completely. Yeah.
I think we've seen some of that at Oregon State. Not many Oregon State fans are predicting a loss here, which I think is fair. Oregon State is the Power 5 team here. Oregon State won the 7 games last year. So did Boise State. I think it's fair to assume that the home team has the advantage in what is essentially a coin flip game. But that being said, Oregon State is traditionally a team that starts very slow, kind of builds momentum as the year goes on. Mountain West teams have traditionally beaten up on Oregon State. I mean, go back to the LA Bowl last year, and Oregon State lost to a Utah State team that, while very good, was still a Mountain West team. And I think if Oregon State is going to take that next step and become a Pac-12 title contender like it hopes to be this year, you would hope that a team like that could, quote unquote, take care of business against a Mountain West school at home in week 1. Before we let you go here, Jordan, I just want to ask you a couple of Andy Avalos related questions, because obviously he was a first-year head coach last year, was taking over a situation that, I think as far as non-Power 5 jobs goes, Boise State's about as good as it gets. I think you could throw UCF and maybe Houston in there too. But in the second year of the Avalos era, coming off of such a disappointing year, how lofty are the goals and expectations in Boise this year? Not only, within the building, at BSU, but also, around what media expectations are and what the fans are hoping to see.
Yeah, I mean they're a big thing, and they've been pretty vocal of like winning a Mountain West championship. And I think every Mountain West team probably says the same thing. Just like sure, Oregon State says they want to win a Pac-12 title, but realistically, I think it's like making sure the program is back on the track that Brian Harsin left it in when he bolted for Auburn, and kind of continuing that winning tradition a little bit. And from what I've heard is like Andy Avalos is a lot more business like this year. It's not as much a friendship as much with players. It's a little more, hey, these are the expectations I have, and these are the standards for this program, and you guys need to meet these in order for us to accomplish all our goals. So yeah, I think as you can just say championship, but realistically it's like that is the goal. And especially with these Pac-12 and Big 12 and Big 10 and all the conference realignment stuff swirling around, like all of a sudden this season is a lot more important in the grand scheme of things. And you've got these Big 12 or Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12 commissioners looking around and looking at TV numbers every day. It's a really big year, and I think he realizes that. He is an alum. It's not like his seat would be hot right now. It's not like his seat would be hot if he went to another 7-5, but I think he realizes that the people here really expect to be in the BCS New Year's Six, not BCS, man, I'm old. The New Year's Six Bowl conversation every year. And that's the goal, is how do you leverage these next couple seasons and get into the Big 12, get into the Pac-12. So I think that's kind of why this year is so important, why this Oregon State game is so important. Is Andy Avalos, the right guy for this job? Can he continue this? Can Boise State's brand, can its, tradition carry on into the 2020s? And, there's all these big picture things that you can start analyzing like crazy. And it's pretty easy to, but a lot hinges on this year.
Anything else you want to throw at Jordan, Angie, before we let him go enjoy the Central Oregon golf scene?
No, I want to let him go. I could get into the whole realignment talk, but that's for another day. No, the whole thing. I mean, Oregon State, I think, is struggling some right now with where they end up. And then, the Pac-12 traditionally has been so, the chancellors and presidents are so stuck on their academic prowess and where that fits. And, that's, I think, the biggest knock on Boise is just that it's not, the research.
What is it? The P1? Research or whatever they call it.
Yeah. The tier 1 research.
Yeah.
And they have all their, like I said, do I think it's a little out of date? Absolutely. Especially for a conference, an athletic conference. But it's just going to be an interesting, dynamic to see. And, I think Pac-12 fans are, I know Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, to some extent, they're all kind of trying to stay in that trying to stay relative. Then you look at, Boise doesn't make any sense from a recruiting standpoint, but maybe branching out to like a Texas, TCU, try to get a Houston, SMU, that makes a little more sense, because then you're going to get more eyeballs. It's a whole, I don't know. And like I said, Oregon State really kind of is going to be just going with the flow and seeing where we end up.
But and I think the weird argument with Boise State and conference realignment is like people just look at TV markets, like, oh, Boise's like a number 90 or 100 TV market, which I think is a really outdated way of thinking about these things. I think when you go and look at actual TV numbers of like when Boise State is on TV, how many eyeballs are they getting? There's more eyeballs on a Boise State game than a San Diego State game. Even though the San Diego market is far larger. And so I think that's one of those things that, people just look on the surface and it's like, Boise will never get in a big conference. The TV market's too small. It's like, well, people can stream a game from their phone.
It's not, it's no longer just in your living room having to watch it on whatever ABC is carrying. So absolutely.
So that'll be interesting the next couple of years to see how that all plays in.
And it's interesting this week too, with Oregon State playing Boise State. maybe make a statement. Hey, we don't belong in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
We are better
Yeah.
than Boise State. And for Boise State's case, hey, we just beat a Pac-12 team. Let us
Yeah.
in. It's a really interesting narrative this week. And again,
Yeah.
Angie and I, we both want to thank you, Jordan, so much for
Thank
taking
you.
the
Thank
time
you.
to join our episode of the Damn Podcast today. I'll be looking for you at Reeser on Saturday. Excited to
Heck yeah.
to see you in person. And I want to plug here, if you haven't checked out BeaverBlitz.com today, which what are you doing if you haven't? Jordan contributed to this week's Behind Enemy Lines. He offered all sorts of great insight in addition to the knowledge that he just dropped here on the Damn Podcast. So make sure you read that. Jordan, thanks again. Go.
Thank you guys.
What's your goal today? What are you trying to shoot out there at Tethrow?
I don't know. It's like a links course. I've never played it. Let's under 90 would be great. So that's
Solid.
the goal.
Okay.
We are
Yeah.
wishing you luck.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank
thanks
you.
a bunch, Jordan.
Yep. Have a good one.
That was Jordan Kaye, the Boise State beat reporter at the Idaho Press. We thank him for joining us and thank everyone for watching and listening here on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We're not going anywhere. I want to let Angie plug something real quick, though, before we come back for the second half of the show, where we're going to talk Oregon State news from Jonathan Smith's press conference and more, and provide our keys to the game. But Angie, you've got a special offer to promote here at BeaverBlitz.com.
Huge. It's not live yet. We're taping this Thursday afternoon at 3:30. Just want to let everyone know that this evening at midnight or around there, probably closer to 10 o'clock our time, we will be flipping over to our start of the season promotion with 24/7 Sports, which will get you an annual subscription for 75% off. It's huge. It's only around for this weekend to kick off the college football season. So please do not miss it. This is your one big chance to get an entire season or an entire year of Beaver Blitz for under $50. So it's huge deal and the best deal we will be running all season. So jump on it. That, like I said, should flip this evening, probably around 10-ish, I'm guessing our time, and we'll run through the weekend. So make sure you jump on that because you will not want to miss any of Carter's amazing content or discussion in the lodge this season. It's shaping up to a really, really exciting season.
All right, let's kick off this second half of the Damn Podcast here on Thursday, September 1st. Angie, has it hit you yet? It's September. It probably did hit you today when you sent your kids off to school.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of bizarro actually, but yeah, it doesn't seem like September. In fact, I'm in the house today because it was a little hot outside. It's like 90 here, and we have neighbors working in their house in their yard. So I'm inside, but it's here. It's football season, and it's time to let's go.
Yeah, I was doing some work outside for a few hours before I came in for this, and just enjoying that now early September sunshine. About a 90-degree day up here in the Portland area. About 82, I think, in Corvallis on Saturday for game day. I know it's going to be a little cloudy in the morning, but it should be a great evening. 7:30 kickoff, so it could get a little chilly towards the end of the game, but I think it's going to be a great evening for football. The Reeser Stadium construction project will be on full display. ESPN in the house. Big time opponent. It's an exciting time. I am really pumped for college football to be back. And as soon as we're done here, I'm going to go turn on the Backyard Brawl and watch that. But Angie and I have been in Corvallis this week off and on. We've been trading off who makes the pilgrimage down to Corvallis. But we both made the trip on Monday for Jonathan Smith's first Monday press conference of the season. And of course, with that comes the initial release of Oregon State's depth chart, which I've been asked multiple times on, the different hits that I've done and, opponent previews that I've done for other outlets. Were there any surprises on the depth chart? And
let me just say, you nailed it. You and I, well, you sent me, I put in my feedback, but your prediction was about knocked it out of the park, Carter.
Yeah. And to the point there, I've been asked if there have been any surprises. I was like, no, I think it went exactly how I expected. Obviously, not everybody's as tuned in as you and I watching practice every day. So I'm sure, fans might be surprised to see a thing or two. But I think as far as what we saw in camp, every now and then they'll throw somebody on there or give somebody a starting job that we didn't expect. But everything went pretty much chalk.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Angie, did anything stand out to you? Maybe not necessarily surprising, but things that maybe fans might be surprised to see, or things that you think are interesting about how this depth chart shakes out? Because the one thing that comes to mind for me, actually too, is that you've got a true freshman on the 2 deep at outside linebacker, and then you've got 5 guys on the 2 deep at running back.
Yeah, and I also think you have to mention the quarterback, and just the fact that there was really no QB battle. I mean, you and I, Carter, said the starting quarterback was going to be Chance Nolan back week 1.
I think we said that in spring camp.
We said it in spring camp, but I don't understand really kind of why they kept that going, because Chance Nolan took 98% probably of the first team snaps. But no, it was interesting. They always have to play their little games, and but yeah, the 5 running backs on the 2 deep was interesting. I mean, and a true freshman we have. So the other true freshman, Dylan Lopez. Was he left guard? Is that backup left guard? Right guard.
Left guard, I think.
Left guard, yeah. Which surprised me, because I thought he was brought in as a center, but that just kind of goes along with that whole Jim Mahalik mentality that you just bring guys in. He was an interior lineman, so and just the best 5 or the best 10 guys are on that list. So fun to see. So what we had, Matthias, Malaki Donaldson, Dylan Lopez, and Damian Martinez are your 3 true freshmen that are on that 2 deep.
Not every year that we see a bunch of true freshmen on an initial 2 deep at Oregon State. Newcomers, generally kind of ease their way in. Even some JUCO guys in the past haven't cracked it, and we've been surprised about.
JUCOs would take time, and so that maybe that's another surprise too, is just how strong Ryan Cooper has been in the secondary, coming on pretty strong.
Slotted in as a 1A, 1B guy at the nickelback position with Ron Harge III. I'll be interested to see how Oregon State utilizes that position this year, just because, and we're kind of going off topic here, but with Alton Julian, his health, Jaden Grant moving over to safety from the nickel position, curious to see how they approach that, if they want to get multiple safeties on the field at the same time. That's a discussion for another day, and that'll work itself out over the course of the year. But yeah, 3 true freshmen on the depth chart, a lot of guys at running back. One other depth chart note that I wanted to hit on here is, of course, at quarterback. Quarterback is the most talked about position on the football team, for good reason, of course. But at Oregon State, it's Chance Nolan at QB1, but backing him up, the competition is still alive there. So Tristan Gebbia and Ben Gulbranson are in a 2A, 2B role right now. And, if something, knock on wood, were to happen to Chance Nolan, we don't know who would step in for him. And I think Angie and I both have our preference as to, who might have the higher ceiling and who might bring a little bit something different to the offense if they needed it. But what do you make of the backup quarterback competition right now? And obviously, we're kind of scratching for stuff here, talking about a backup quarterback competition, but I do think it's worth noting.
It is. It's interesting because you and I think both went into this thinking that Gebbia was a senior, but I've learned that Gebbia got a 7th year of eligibility should he decide to take it. So he's actually a redshirt junior this year. So with COVID and then with his injury, medical hardship, he actually has this year and another year if he chooses to use it. So I think Oregon State's trying to be coy there and trying to keep people from entering transfer portal. If it was me, and from what I saw, and granted, we don't see everything, we don't get to break down film of practice, but just my gut from what I saw at practice, I would go with a Ben Gulbranson, just because I think the ceiling's higher. You need to get him some reps in game. However, Gebbia has game experience, and he's won some games for the Beavs too. So, it's not a bad problem to have, but I think the coaches are trying to be, as much as they can, keep guys from jumping in that portal, because that's the new way to go, it seems like.
We're in agreement there, and I think there's a time and a place for both of those quarterbacks on the field. If, let's say Oregon State needs a spark, let's say Chance Nolan hasn't played well for the first 2 weeks, maybe you go to Ben because his deep ball ability and what he brings as far as that's concerned, maybe that sparks something in the offense. And and unlocks something there. But maybe he goes down in the fourth quarter of a tight game and you need somebody to come in, manage the clock, and go down for a game-winning drive. Well, we've seen Tristan Gebbia do that before. He's a sixth-year guy, somebody who has won games for the Beavers before. Maybe you see him come in there. So I think Oregon State has three quarterbacks that it can score points and win with. So, there's only room for one of them on the field at a time. But I think they would be just fine with any of them taking the field. So good to see a lot of depth there because, Angie and I both have our concerns about Oregon State's recruiting ability to the quarterback position. But again, a conversation
Another
for
day.
another day. Another point of news from Jonathan Smith's press conference on Monday. This team is really, really healthy, which...
Knock on wood, on something.
Seriously. But entering week one, it's not a given that Oregon State is at full strength or near full strength. In fact, in recent years, there have been a lot of key injuries in fall camp. Go back to last year, and the top defensive lineman on the team, and Isaac Hodgins, went down with a season-ending foot injury like 2 or 3 days into camp. So the fact that Oregon State comes into week one with only 2 guys listed as out for sure, a testament to what they were able to do health-wise during camp. So those 2 guys are outside linebacker Ryan Franke, who will miss the entire season with a leg injury, and then Sione Lolohea on the defensive line, entering his true sophomore season, is out for a couple of more weeks with an undisclosed injury. So those 2 are the only that for
we don't
sure
know. Yeah,
are
we
out
don't.
this week.
We don't know. We had seen Easton Mascarenas, or you did, at practice 2 weeks ago. He's fine. He's good to go. So you had seen him out, but yeah, this is the healthiest I've seen this group. And like I said, it feels kind of almost like a jinx saying that, but hopefully they can all stay healthy.
Do you think we see Alton Julian this week? Do you think he makes his return from an ACL tear?
I don't. I mean, we're not even a full year out from that.
Yeah.
Coach Smith said on Monday that he expected, didn't he? It wasn't expected to be cleared. Is that what he said?
Yeah, he said he expects him to be cleared for Saturday, which I think is coach speak for he's not cleared.
Yeah.
And if you're not cleared for game action, what are you doing in practice? I know that he has practiced, and
Yes.
I've seen him on the practice field, but I don't know what he's cleared to do and what he's not. So I think it's probably a stretch to say that he's going to be ready for week one, but he wasn't ruled out, so that's worth
ruled
saying.
out. Yeah, exactly. And so I think we're going to get he's day to day is
Right.
what it's going to be the coach speak for that. But I think as long as the Beavers don't need him to be on the field, I think it's better to on an ACL to ease him back in and make sure he's golden before you tear him loose.
And while Oregon State would love to have him on the field, I think a potential first or second team all conference safety there.
Yeah.
The Beavers are just fine on the back end of the defense right now as far as health, talent, experience goes. The Beavers will be fine without him, so they don't need to rush him back.
Yes.
But again, he's the one question mark. Ryan Franke, Sione Lolohea are out. Outside of that, Oregon State is a very healthy team right now. Again, we'll keep knocking on wood there, but if the Beavers can maintain that, they have a lot of depth at a lot of positions, and I think that's going to be a real strength of this team. Any other noteworthy things that you learned from interviews this week? You talked to AJ Stewart, the running backs coach, Chance Nolan, and Luke Musgrave on Tuesday. I spoke with Trent Bray and a couple of defensive guys in Riley Sharp and Alex Austin on Wednesday. Nothing groundbreaking.
No.
On my end. I don't know if you picked up anything that you wanted to pass on here.
AJ
Obviously,
Stewart.
you can go watch those interviews on our YouTube page and on at BeaverBlitz.com. But go ahead, Angie.
Oh, AJ Stewart was interesting. That was my first time interviewing him. So much. I mean, he had a lot to say. It was a 10-minute interview almost, and a lot of questions about how do you manage that room when you have 5 guys that are on that 2 deep. And he talked about just the fact that in his opinion, Deshaun Fenwick and Trey Lowe kind of elevated themselves kind of in all facets of everything they're asking those guys to do. That's why they earned the or for the starting spot. The other guys are working on some things. And he said it's a transparent room. He's constantly, every week he tells these guys what his expectations are, what they need to work on. And I asked him a little more about Damian Martinez, the freshman, because you guys know I'm super, super high on him. As is he. Coach Stewart has been blown away with his maturity and what he's bringing. But he said, his biggest thing is he's learning the offense and he's taking notes. He goes, he's never seen a kid take so many notes. But then he comes back the next day at practice and he's fixed what he needed to fix. So you can't ask for more than that if you're a coach.
Great insight from AJ Stewart there. Before we move on to our final segment, we did have a comment come in through the YouTube chat that I want to throw up here. And thanks again for everybody who's watching us live on YouTube.
There's a little smackdown going on there with Boise State.
There's a lot back and forth
between
the Oregon State and Boise State fans in the chat right now. But this comment came in from Dead Star Cartel, who threw on we lost it. There it is. Who I threw on the screen earlier. This individual played right guard next to Brandon Kipper in high school at the tackle position out in Caldwell. Said that he's a stud. Really cool to have that perspective there. I saw that come in and wanted to highlight. So thanks to all of the Idaho-based, Boise State fans out here watching us and picking up some intel on the Beavs. The back and forth between Oregon State and Boise State fans this week, not only in our YouTube chat right now, but just in general, I think has been really entertaining. It's
fun. It's not like an Oregon State rivalry or some of those Pac-12 rivalries, but I would say Boise State Oregon State has had a pretty long-term back and forth, and it's fun to watch.
Our final segment here on this Thursday episode of the Damn Podcast, we're going to make this a weekly thing, and I think we're going to follow kind of the same format every week. Bring on a guest, talk about what we learned throughout the week, and then provide a couple of keys to the game. So I've got an offensive key and a defensive key. Angie, I don't know if you prepped anything other than what I've got on the notes, and if not, that's fine. We can highlight these here. But offensively, my key for Oregon State is it's got to find a way to move the ball through the air. And I think you and I have both expressed our concerns over the last few weeks about Oregon State's passing game, its questionable depth at receiver, inability to establish anything deep with consistency. Jordan mentioned that one of Boise State's strength is its secondary, and I think that matchup right there is really concerning. So I think Oregon State's got to be able to move the ball through the air if it wants to maintain consistency on the offensive side of the ball.
That's good, but my offensive key to the game is being able to move the ball on the ground. I think this is going to be a ground and pound game for Oregon State. I already think that Oregon State's offensive line will be able to, should be able to handle the defensive front. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but I would like to see that matchup. But I think Oregon State's running game is going to have to keep them in this game, control the clock, control the time of possession, and move the ball that way. And I think if they're going to have success with the air, it's going to have to be kind of the little dink and dunk passes. But I want to see the ground game, really, really thrive this week.
That's a good point. And, I'm kind of going to push back a little bit because the reason I've got moving the ball through the air as my key is because I think Oregon State will be able to establish a ground presence. And I think Boise State's, it's not going to give them anything on the ground. But as Jordan said, that defensive line is still somewhat of a concern outside of Scott Matlock. The front seven is not necessarily as strong as the back end. So I think Oregon State will be able to run the ball, but it might not be able to if the Broncos stack the box. And if the Beavs know that they can't get anything through the air, if they've proven that they can't, Boise State's just going to stack the box, throw those safeties into the front seven, bring a little bit more pressure. So I think in order to maintain that ability to move the ball on the ground, the Beavers are going to have to find success through the air. But
and a little bit of fly sweep.
It's a good point. It's a good point by you still.
Some fly sweep action and maybe a little tight end action too.
Spread that Boise State defense out. Defensively for Oregon State. So this is obviously, our eyes are going to be on the defense. I think we know what we're going to get from the Oregon State offense, but defensively, obviously that's a lot of where the questions lie, where some of the anticipation is. So my key defensively for the Beavers here in week 1 is to establish a presence in the backfield. So as Jordan mentioned, last year, Boise State's offensive line, it can't get any worse than what it was last year. But it hasn't proven that it is better on game day quite yet. And I think Oregon State, with what it hopes to get out of its front seven this week, it's a matchup that, maybe allows Oregon State to prove that it has made a lot of improvements there.
I agree. I think getting pressure on Bachmeier is going to be the key to this game defensively. And you and I have been raving about the defense all fall, and we've seen them dominate Oregon State in the first scrimmage. We've heard they've done pretty well throughout the fall camp. So putting pressure, and this is going to be a big test for Trent Bray. What kind of blitz packages he brings? He wants to be, he wants to keep it, keep things different and surprise people, but he doesn't want to show his whole hand for the whole season up front. So, there's that fine balance between how vanilla you play it and what you do. So you want to do as little as you can and still bring the pressure. But I'm excited to see, where some of the stuff ends.
That's one of the kind of the challenges of playing a team like Boise State in week 1, Fresno State in week 2 is, well, maybe you don't want to reveal everything for conference play, but these aren't teams that you can only use half of your playbook against. And that goes for both sides of the ball. I think Oregon State is going to have to reveal a lot of its playbook in week 1 and week 2 to get the job done. Whereas if they had started the season with Montana State instead of putting them in week 3, I think that's where you see Oregon State play a little more conservatively. But in order to get the job done against Boise State, Trent Bray is probably going to have to show quite a bit of his new defense. And I'm excited for Oregon State fans to see it because so far it's been behind closed doors and they've kind of been taking our word for it. We've been saying, oh yeah, this defense looks totally re-energized and they're flying around. Well, now's their chance to prove us right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, I think just the potential for that group to take advantage of Boise State's shaky pass protection last year and an inability to get something going on the ground. I think we get a good read this week on what Trent Bray's defense is going to look like. Anything else you want to add, Angie? Any more keys? Any takeaways from what Jordan said? Anything before we get out of here?
No, I'm excited for week 1, and it's fun to see the back and forth. Are we doing predictions here, or are we going to wait to reveal this on BeaverBlitz tomorrow?
I think we're going to save that. I think we're going to save it for BeaverBlitz.com. That's what I was working on right before we came onto the pod here. I was formatting our staff picks. I will say most of us are in agreement, but not all of us. So this is not a consensus week, and I didn't expect it to be with how even we see this matchup.
I just want to remind everyone to this weekend, 75% off a BeaverBlitz membership, and that gets you access to all 24/7 sites. It gets you access to the lodge and just all the great content that Carter is putting out.
It's a big week for everyone involved, us included. I know I've been a lot busier. I know you've been a lot busier. We've been driving down to Corvallis, working into the late hours of the evening, getting content out there. I'm excited for college football to be back. I forgot how exhausting it was, but this is the time of week where it starts to pay off. Yes. Friday is my day off. I'm going to be sitting on the couch watching some football in the evening, not only today, but of course tomorrow. And then Saturday, the nice thing is Oregon State doesn't play till 7:30. So watch some Oregon, Georgia, watch some Big Noon, watch all of those big matchups. I'll probably miss Utah and Florida, probably be on the way down to Corvallis when that's going on. But yeah, an opportunity to watch a lot of college football before Oregon State takes the field at 7:30. So with week 1 being here, that is all for our podcast content before the game, but we are going to be back on Sunday to recap it. We're going to continue to go Sunday, Thursday throughout the football season, bring on some guests on Thursday. We're going to tap into the 24/7 Sports Network. And next week, I assume we'll have Jackson Moore of barkboard.com on. No guarantees.
He will be you guys will get to know him because he also runs a couple other Pac-12 sites too. So we might have Jackson on a few times.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully we get him on next week. But if not, we'll find somebody to provide some insight into the Fresno State program. But all eyes are on Boise State. I'll be down in Corvallis. Angie's going to handle the game thread from the comfort of her couch, watching on ESPN. I want to thank everybody for watching us live on YouTube. Again, we really appreciate the support there. Numbers continue to go through the roof. Thanks for everybody who found us on the various podcasting apps out there. Again, leaving a 5-star review just helps people find our new page and our new feed and continue to spread the word. So thanks to everybody for joining us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back on Sunday after our weekend at Beaver Blitz, full of game coverage, our instant recaps with top performers, he said, she said, one of our fan favorites, which of course is a VIP feature. So if you want to read that and some of the other stuff we have throughout the week at Beaver Blitz, be sure to take advantage of that 75% off deal that Angie mentioned. So we'll be back podcast wise on Sunday, but we're not going anywhere at BeaverBlitz.com. But until then, you can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns, and we'll be back on Sunday for another episode of the Podcast.